June of this year, your office started tracking which offenders released without bail.
I'm going to be honest. I don't even believe that for a second, the 70% recommitted. I don't even believe that for a second. I'm sorry. Especially because we've seen people. First of all, this is no cash bail policies, which is different than like early release. Okay? And early release has been so fundamentally successful that out of 11,000 people that have been released early, okay, and that process is not as easy as the way Fox News presents it. It's not like, oh, are you a rapist murderer? Hello, go ahead. Oh, did you do 1 day in prison? Okay, time to release you. That's not how that works. It is a brutal process, regardless of the new new measures, regardless of the new measures that that have been put in place. It's usually people that have served out 2/3 of their sentence. You know what I mean? Like 10 years out of a fucking 15-year sentence, for example. And they let them out in 10 instead of making them serve 15. And it's because they already have demonstrated good behavior. A process that is already inherently racist, a process that is already being looked at by a bunch of racist-ass, old-ass judges and shit, okay? Like these guys, if they're being released early, it means that they have somehow been able to avoid like becoming a more hardened criminal in prison, which is something that you need to do to basically survive in prison. Like they've done the unimaginable. And that's precisely why out of the 11,000 people that have been let out on early release, okay? Out of the 11,000 people that have been let out on early release, only 17 have reoffended. And most of those are for drug charges, like parole violations, like you tested, you got tested and you smoked weed, so you're going back to prison. 17 out of 11,000 prisoners that were released. 17. That recidivism rate is so fucking insanely marginal and tiny that it is a gangbusters program. It is probably the most successful program in American, not even American, sorry. That is the most successful criminal justice rehabilitation program on the planet, okay? Like unimaginable. That's better than Norway, dude. Okay? Literally. 17%. You think 17 people out of 11,000 is 17%? If it was 17%, that would still be worldwide record-breaking low recidivism. But it's not 17%. Like 0.01%. Even if it was 17%, that would be like better than like Norwegian recidivism rates.
Bail went on to commit new crimes in Yolo, California. And here's what you find. Of the 595 individuals released,
0% or it's useless. Got to work on these reactionary takes, my man. You're joking, right? There is no system on the planet where there is like 0%.
420 were rearrested for new crimes. That's a 70.6% recidivism rate. And of those 103 offenders, 20% were rearrested for violent crimes, including murder, attempt murder, kidnapping, robbery, carjacking, and domestic violence. What did you think when you saw those numbers?
It's a staggering number. I mean, it frankly it shocks the conscience to think that many new crimes were committed by these people, released on zero bail, and all of the new victims. That's what I thought about, all of the new victims who had been created as a result of this policy.
So how is it that those people ended up on the streets in the first place? Was it purely the guidelines of the California Judicial County? Was it the way that they were charged? What led to them getting back on the streets?
Right. Well, during 2020 and the first part of 2021, we were under a mandated zero bail policy because of court actions and local actions as well, not my choosing. But zero bail was the rage in California during the pandemic. And as a result, you had people.
Oh, my God. Okay, listen. Part of the reason why they had this is because the California prison system is so insanely overcrowded, okay? This is a problem that is caused by the very same issue that they're on the other side of, all right? Like, the reason why California was like, yeah, we got to release some of these prisoners as a consequence of COVID was because, like, they were standing on top of one another. They were literally, the prisons are overcrowded in California. People think California is communism land, when in fact, it's liberalism land, and liberalism is very reactionary, okay? And still, arrests an insane amount of people. California's prisoner population is massive. California's prisoner per capita population is larger than most other countries on the planet. If California as an individual state was a nation state, it would still have some of the highest prisoner density on the planet. Obviously, this is the same for most of the United States of America. However, California is uniquely bad. Maybe not as bad as like Louisiana, but pretty bad. And of course, a big chunk of that comes from the drastic economic inequality that people are subjected to in liberal safe havens like California. Okay? And the issue is that the prison system, which, by the way, you could learn more about. It sucks to like weirdly plug my take, but like I have a friend who actually went into, he was in county jail. Come on, let's not compare ourselves to Louisiana. I mean, Louisiana is the worst of the worst on the planet. Like, Angola is literally a plantation. So I don't know how else to describe it. Sup, dog, you calling out NOLA? I mean, dude, Louisiana is horrifyingly racist. Anywhere where there's a lot of black people, there's a lot of fucking white people that are trying to figure out new ways of jailing and enslaving those black people. And Louisiana is no different. California prisons are awful. California has 114,000 prisoners. Germany has 44,588. Anyway, the California prison system is really awful. If you want personal details about it, I have a friend, Jeff Wittick, who actually went into LA County Jail and served a prison sentence there and was actually let out early as a consequence of COVID. And he goes through the steps of what you have to do to survive in prison in LA County Jail specifically. I talked about it with him on the podcast Fear and. A really good episode. It's unfortunately behind a paywall, but if you want to watch it, you can go to patreon.com/fear and you know, watch the video where he basically details like what he has done, what he had to do in prison to protect himself, and how like the prisoners basically ran the show within the jail. It's a gruesome and horrifying story in general. Luckily, he survived it, obviously. Per capita, California has over 500 prisoners for 100,000 people, whereas Germany has 70. Fascinating stuff. Yeah, real fascinating. And basically what I'm saying is the reason why California had to catch and release, or the reason why California had to implement these protocols, was because there's just not enough room. Because the prisoner per capita population is incredibly high. Now, there's another problem here, though. And the other problem is a lot of people end up doing crimes again. Why? Because the underlying reasons as to why they did the crime in the first place has not changed. And then the solution to that person doing that kind of crime is never rehabilitation, but instead just putting him in a system that will force him to do even more crime and become an even more hardened criminal within the prison system in order to survive. And then lastly, there are no alternative options once that person is released from jail that will allow them to bounce back and fix the underlying problems that they experienced. So we are in this like incredible circumstance where our prisons are overflowing. Yeah, our prisons are overflowing. There is no way to solve some of the underlying material conditions as to why crime even happens. Okay, so then they just like, they just decide like, oh, what's the most woke way to deal with this? The most liberal woke way to deal with it is the exact same way that we deal with homeless people. Okay, which is, of course, hilariously, laughably brutal, which is, hey, look the other way. Let homeless people live on the street and eat trash and look the other way. That's the woke thing to do. God forbid we offer them housing. God forbid we have a housing first policy in dealing with homelessness and tackling this insane crisis. God forbid we normalize the housing market so that people aren't every day, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people aren't getting priced out of housing in places like California where their jobs are. You know, God forbid we do any of that. Just let them live on the street and eat trash and come jerk off, you know, outside of your house. Okay? That's the liberal solution. The Republican solution is just to murder them. And it sucks because there is an adequate solution that other countries have utilized. Vienna is a good example of this. Red Vienna. And European social democracies have great examples of this, where they do have better pricing for their housing. It's hilariously stupid when you put it into plain terms. This guy stole a car and sold it for drug money. How do we help him? Let's make it so that employers won't hire him into legit jobs and then repeatedly fine him for his drug addiction so he has massive debt that he can't pay off through legal means. That will help. Yeah. But ultimately, when you put that dude through the system, that dude is a slave. Now you have a slave for the remainder of his years. You know what I mean? He's in the system early on. He has no options. How the fuck are you going to overcome any of that stuff? He's not. So now he's in the system, and when you're in the system, you can go make license plates for a penny an hour. You know, it's great. You can go fight wildfires in California for 2 cents an hour. Would you be okay with housing for the homeless in your neighborhood? Yes, you idiot. Why wouldn't I? I already house homeless people in this neighborhood. They're just living in a tent. I would much rather have them live in a house. What kind of psychotic take is that? Yo, that only is a gotcha if you're just an inhumane piece of shit. You understand? Like, yeah. Why wouldn't I be? Which one's better? Having the homeless people have shelter over their heads so they have basically one of their most profoundly important needs met so that they can get on a pathway to recovery and actually talk to social workers, be able to shower, be able to look for jobs, have internet, electricity, have one of their needs met. Yeah, I would much prefer that to fucking living, to have them live in a tent. To have an address too, that's huge. And for the record, before someone says, oh, why don't you put them in your house then? Like, I live in a house so I don't have to have roommates, okay? There's a difference between privacy. I don't want to have random people, whether they're homeless or not, living in my house. So shut the fuck up. Not the same. But here it is. Police in these West Coast cities disproportionately arresting unhoused people from 2017 through 2020. Unhoused people made up almost an estimated 2% of the population in each of the following cities. However, they made up in Portland 50% of the people that were arrested. 50%. They were 2% of the population, but made up 50% of the people who were arrested. Sacramento, 42%. Los Angeles, 24%. San Diego, 11%. Oakland, 7%. What do you think is going on here? Huh? It's great. What do you mean? This doesn't take into account the proportion of crimes being committed, though, right? Brother, we live in an anti-homeless, anti-poor country, okay? We live in a capitalist country. Homeless people are not productive, okay? They're not productive workers. So the attitude of capital owners is that they should die or go away or be converted into productive workers, possibly at gunpoint. So, yes, while some of those unhoused people that are getting arrested because they're like, you know, doing public indecency. Some of that is also public indecency as a consequence of not having a place to shit, right? No place for hygiene. Some of it is because they are mentally incredibly unwell, okay, and they need mental health treatment. And some of that is because they're just brain broken from, their brains have been fried from like living out and you know, subjecting themselves to the conditions of nature for many years. And yes, they have violent outbursts. Yes, of course. Like valid reasons to arrest someone. Okay? Or there are, of course, valid reasons to arrest some homeless people, for sure. Okay? But a big chunk of the reason for why 50%, despite making up 2% of the population in the city, estimated 2% of the population, they make up 50%, is because there are laws written specifically make it illegal to be homeless. There are valid reasons for why homeless people get incarcerated. Certainly, I'm not going to say that that's not the case. But there are infinitely more awful reasons why people jail homeless people. Anyway, so yeah, it's not an accident.